Welcome to What's the Scenario with PLRB, where we explore claims and coverage scenarios relevant to insurance professionals. I'm Alicia Watley.
I'm Mike Brode.
And I'm Tim Havler.
All right, Mike, what is the scenario?
Woohoo! So let's check this one out, Alicia. It's going to be fun. This is like the story of the cursed couch. So are you ready? Huh? Told you insurance is fun. This is going to be fun. You ready? All right, you're ready. Of course
Yes.
you're ready.
Of course I'm ready.
Right. So I think, Alicia, you just went through this a while ago. You order a couch, right? And it's set for delivery. So the delivery company is hired to transport said couch from the warehouse to the customer's living room, right?
Yes.
So while it's in the warehouse, they're getting ready to load it up, having a cup of coffee, enjoying the time. One of the movers trips over the couch and gets injured. Poor kid. Eventually, they get it over to the lift gate that's attached to the truck. They load it on up. Ooh, but the platform breaks and clamps down on another mover's foot. Ouchie.
Yikes.
Another
Oh, no,
injury.
another one.
Bad day. See, it is cursed. Finally, our movers, even though they're limping around, hurt a little bit, they finally get the thing loaded and they drive it over, where they're wheeling it down the ramp using a hand dolly and manage to run over the one mover's other foot. Oh, jeez.
We need a new moving company.
Right. And poor kids. They finally get the thing off the truck. They set it down on the sidewalk, go back to close up the back of the truck, and then a person walking their dog down the street trips over the couch while it's on the sidewalk. Can you believe it?
No,
This
yeah,
is like
they're clumsy.
slapstick here.
Are their names Larry, Curly, and Moe?
I think there was a Three Stooges episode where they were all movers, and hopefully it had Shemp in there because Shemp's my personal favorite. But once again, I digress. I love Shemp. Anyways, and did you know that Shemp, Curly, and Moe were all brothers?
I did know that.
The Horowitz brothers. Yes, they're awesome. Anyways, here we go. Now they finally get the darn thing delivered to the customer's house and limp away successfully. But there becomes a question, Tim and Alicia. Exactly what policy is going to cover this darn thing? Is it going to be a GL exposure? Is it an auto exposure? Mysteries abound on the podcast today. So we'll find out later.
Yeah, this is a good one. When I was a young lad coming out of law school, I used to move apartments every single year. I did a lot of couch moving in my days. It was not fun, especially going up the staircases that turn back and forth.
Right.
It's an art and a science that I never learned.
Here.
You're supposed to pivot. Pivot.
Turn. You're right.
That reminds me of the Friends episode.
Well, I don't move couches because I'm a lady. So no, I just hire people to do that because the last thing I need is to break something.
Right. And of course, Alicia, being the cheap person I am, I had a interesting story involving my oldest son, Davis. So we were moving Davis, and he got a big old job in lovely Cleveland, OHIO. And we had to move him up to his apartment, and we had this couch that was at our place down in Columbus. So we loaded up on all the U-Haul with all of his other gear, drive it all the way up to Cleveland, Ohio, and we leave the couch for last. We're trying to move it into his apartment, and Tim, you're right. Of course, he lives on the third floor. So up these steps, thing was not light, and it was a pretty long couch. And what we failed to realize is that his apartment had this cool little L-shaped entry. So you enter, there's a wall right there, and then somehow you got to merge around and get to the living room where you could put the couch. And do you think we could wedge that couch in there?
Not without causing a lot of damage.
Right. So long story short, no, we could not. So rejection, and then moving the darn thing back 3 flights of steps, loading it back on the U-Haul, and driving it back to lovely Columbus, Ohio. So not a good day.
All right. So, well, I'll get it started here. Yeah. So Mike, what normally happens when you have? Sounds like there's two policies here.
Right.
And we got an auto, we got a CGL, and we're not sure which one to pick. What normally happens?
Right. So what normally happens as a good claims representative, what do you do, Tim? Just like a good coverage attorney, you pull your policies and you read them. So we'll see. And again, we
hard.
Oh, it is not hard. Even us psychology majors can read. And trust me, I handled these things. So you can do it. If I can do it, Alicia, you certainly can do it. No question. So read the
And
policy. And what we'll find is, again, just like remember we had an earlier episode on our game show with what is it, an auto or mobile equipment, and those two policies, the GL policy and the auto policy, right? I said they dovetail together like peanut butter and jelly to provide the coverage you need. Same thing here. So loading and unloading has an auto exposure piece, has a GL piece. So let's read the policy. GL has an exclusion for auto, right? Because you have an auto policy. So it should be covered under the auto section or policy with your insured. So there's an exclusion there
mhm.
for auto. And in that exclusion, it talks about use of an auto includes loading and unloading. And thankfully, Tim, those are in quotes, which means what?
We go to the definition section.
Yay! Let's go to the definition section, which is further back in your GL policy, towards the back of the policy, towards the end. Here we go. I'm getting there. I promise you. Here we are. Ooh, loading and unloading. There it is. It is definition lucky 11. And here
Yay.
we go. You ready? Oh, I'm going to read it to
Yes.
you. This will be fun. So, loading or unloading means the handling of property, okay, after it is moved from the place where it is accepted for movement into or onto an aircraft, watercraft, or auto, while it is on the aircraft, watercraft, or auto, or while it is being moved from an aircraft, watercraft, or auto to the place where it is finally delivered. So we have before it's moved, while it's in the process of being loaded, and after it's being unloaded into it's to the place where it is finally delivered. Whew. But of course, there has to be some other phraseology in our definitions, which makes this so much fun. But it says loading and unloading does not include the movement of property by means of a mechanical device other than a hand truck that is not attached to the aircraft, watercraft, or auto. So you want to play around with that one a little bit before we get it back to our scenario. So let's say I'm unloading something with a forklift. So forklift is not attached to the auto. So do you think unloading it, would that be a GL mobile equipment exposure?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. I'm shaking my head. Yes, if that wasn't included. Yes. But if something is attached permanently to the auto, like let's say we're unloading bricks and you ever see those construction type vehicles that have a flatbed on the or trailer or flatbed trailer attached to the truck that's driving on down the road. It's got one of those cool little mechanical arms that would unload all the cool little bricks. But this thing is permanently attached to the auto. So do you think
hmm
that is an auto exposure?
If it's attached,
Yes.
yes.
Permanently attached. Yes. Thank you very much. So we're cool there. So yeah. So I wanted to throw that in there just for funsies. But let's go back to our cursed couch scenario. All right. And the first thing that Tim's going to say is all these things involved employees, so that's probably covered under workers' compensation. So you would be right, Tim. So let's pretend that they were people that weren't otherwise employed with our insured in the moving company. So the first person that trips over the couch while it was at the warehouse is just somebody from the general public, all right, walking around for some unknown reason in the back of that warehouse. So this couch now is before it's being delivered. It's just sitting there in the warehouse and somebody trips over it and gets hurt. Do you think that's a GL exposure or would that be an auto exposure?
Okay, so
GL.
before loadings and unloading
Right,
started,
right, right.
yeah, I'm gonna agree with Alicia.
Awesome. You guys are so smart and I appreciate it. So you're right. That would be before it's being loaded onto the vehicle, so it hasn't been accepted for delivery yet. Yes, GL exposure while it's at the warehouse. All right. So then we had the infamous lift drop gate on the back of the truck drops, hurts not the employee's foot. Let's say this was a person who worked at the warehouse, so he's not employed by the moving company. So he's just a dude at the warehouse who's loading us with the one of the workers who works for the delivery company, and it's his foot that gets hurt. So he's not an employee, it's not workers' compensation. So that lift gate drops. Lift gate drop? and caused a foot injury. So what do you think? Is that an auto exposure or a GL exposure?
It sounds like the unloading process has at least started.
Yeah, we're loading now. Yep. So is that leaning you towards auto?
Well, it's attached to the truck, right?
The lift gate is, yep.
Liftgate is. Would
And
that
we're
be an
loading
auto?
it onto
I
an
think an
auto.
auto.
Yay, you're right. So while it is on or it's being loaded onto that aircraft or watercraft or yes, or auto, it would be an auto exposure. So kudos and congratulations. Now we're
Still
unloading
no
the
prize.
darn thing. Right. We're unloading the darn thing using a hand truck. And since you guys, I'm sure, memorized that exclusion as I read it really quick, or that definition, I'm sorry, you're going to remember that hand truck. There was something about a hand truck, right? So did that make it an auto or a GL exposure? Do you
I don't
remember?
remember.
Me, me neither.
It's got to be a trick question. So let's go back. So what would we do, right, Tim? We know though, right? Because we're geniuses. We know, I read something about a hand truck, right? I know there's something out there in the universe about a hand truck. So what do, Tim? I go to my policy. What do, Alicia? I read the definitions. All right. So let's go back to loading and unloading. Remember, because I made a big thing out of it. We talked about
Yes, you did.
been
And we
accepted.
obviously
Now
weren't
we're
paying
moving
attention.
it. Now we're delivering it. Yep. And then I said, there's a but here. But unloading, or I'm sorry, loading or unloading does not include the movement of property by means of a mechanical device. And here it is, other than a hand truck that is
Truck.
not
Yes.
attached to
Mm.
the aircraft watercraft. So if it's not attached, which a hand truck wouldn't be, you're generally thinking that's a GL exposure. But because of the wonders of the policy, I guess they're saying, hand trucks belong to the moving company. So as long as it's a hand truck, that's going to fall under an auto exposure. Isn't that exciting? Isn't this fun? Come on.
That's
Huh?
weird.
Huh? It is weird. But yeah, it's odd. And then what's a hand truck? So that's why we need Tim and PLRB and all the coverage attorneys and the liability side. Michelle, who's not here today, she would be digging into that. What the heck is a hand truck? But we know a little dolly, a little hand truck. So that's going to be an auto exposure, believe it or not. Even though it seems GL-ish, it's an
Yeah,
auto.
because it's not
Why?
attached to anything.
Exactly. But so it is because of how this definition is defined. But again, it goes back to the main point we were making early on that notice how the two policies are working together. So the thing is a adjuster back in the day when young Michael Brode, back when I had hair and it was a lot darker, I would read through these things and that's what you got to do. You got to dig through it, you got to read it, and you got to figure out what's going on because that's what's happening here. All right. But we had one more. Now, even more confusing, we get the thing off the truck with our hand dolly, all right, and we stop temporarily at the sidewalk while we're closing the back doors to the truck. Somebody walking their dog tripped and fell over the couch while it was on the sidewalk. So, where are we at here? Is that an auto exposure or is it a
Well,
GL
it's
exposure?
off. It's off the truck. It's been on
Off
the
the truck. It's
hand
on the hand
truck, or
truck.
what we call it.
Yes. Do you want me to read the three types of things that are loading and unloading? Would that be helpful in our analysis of
Yes.
this one? All right, good.
Yes.
Loading or unloading means the handling of property, which this is, after it is moved from the place where it is accepted for movement onto the auto. All right, so that's the loading part. While it is in or on the auto, that's while we're hauling it down the road, also an auto exposure. And then C, while it is being moved from the aircraft, watercraft, or auto to the place where it is finally delivered. So, question, is the sidewalk to the place where it is finally delivered?
I hope
No.
not.
You're
No.
thinking no, but yeah, but good point there too, Tim, because you think no, but hey, what if this is some odd customer who said, that's exactly where I want it. Leave it there, boys. Get out of here. Hey, maybe that's finally delivered then. I don't know. But yes, good job by both of you to figure out, yeah, letter C in that definition probably isn't to the place where it is finally delivered yet. So that sidewalk trip would make it a what? It's still a, starts with A, exposure.
Auto.
Auto, yay, because it's not finally delivered. So does that make sense? So while it's in the warehouse waiting for somebody to pick it up, that's a GL exposure. But
Hmm.
while we're loading it, while it's hauling it on down the road and trucking, that's an auto exposure, of course. And then while you're unloading the darn thing
Unloading.
until it is to the point where it is finally delivered, it is an auto, especially if you're using a Hand truck, it's still an auto. If you're using a permanently attached piece of equipment to that truck that is then unloading it, that's also an auto, as we found, right? But if you're using something like a forklift or some kind of conveyor belt that isn't attached permanently to the auto, that would then make it a GL exposure, correct?
Correct.
Oh, come on.
And
Wasn't
I
this
would
fun?
still say find new movers. I
A
don't
good
trust
point,
any of
yeah.
them.
These guys limping around, yeah, there might be bleeding and whatnot coming into your house, ruining your couch. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it is a
because
cursed
once you get
couch.
blood on the couch, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But Mike, what's your takeaway from
Oh,
this scenario?
I had a few. Are you ready? First, as always, what do we want to do? Get your policy, make sure it's the right one, get your corrected edition and your dates, make sure you're reading the right policy that's found on your deck page. Read the darn thing. Look at things like defined terms and your exclusions, and always think about any claim that involves maybe a GL exposure or an auto exposure. Pick up not just one policy, but two fabulous policies. Read them together because many times these two policies dovetail together perfectly to provide the coverage your insured's needs. So make sure there, when you're reading through it, you can figure out, is this an auto exposure? Is it a GL exposure? And important points for those claims reps out there investigating these cases, make sure you cover with your folks these important parts. What happened in that whole process, right? So here we had all sorts of bad things that happened. So get a good statement from folks. Where was it in this process? Was it before it was accepted for delivery in a warehouse? Who was moving it? What were they moving it with? Where was it at the time? Was it on the vehicle, being put on the vehicle? Was there something permanently attached to the auto that was involved here? Make sure you're covering all these things carefully. And then finally, was it to the point where it was finally delivered? Because that's a key point here in your analysis of coverage. So read those policies carefully. Make sure you understand the dovetails between the policies and make sure you're doing a proper investigation so you understand exactly what happened here and what process it was in the time when something tragic like this happened with the cursed couch. Tim, where can adjuster go to learn more?
I'm so glad you asked. Members can come to
Yay.
plrb.org
Hmm.
and find lots of resources discussing everything we talked about today, including policy annotation GL 109. That would
Ooh.
be easily searchable on PLRB's site by just typing GL 109 into the search box. That's an annotation chapter that covers the definition of loading or unloading, which I'm sure includes all of the case law that we are aware of about those, as well as further discussions and prior coverage questions on point.
Ooh.
For example, prior coverage question 2006. PLRB attorney answered, is unloading hay from a trailer covered under a commercial auto policy?
Mm.
So these are all going to be great resources. For these and
Right.
more, again, come to plrb.org. And finally, Alicia,
Yes,
can we please share those links in the show notes?
absolutely. So we'll have links to the policies Tim just mentioned. You can find a recap of today's key points from this episode. You'll also find links to our social media and information on how to submit your own adjuster story. But
Ooh.
don't forget to subscribe and rate
Yes.
us on whatever platform you're listening to. What's the scenario with PLRB?
Right.
And again, always visit www.plrb.org for
And
all
I
of
have
your insurance resources.
Oh, I know we're almost done, but I had an idea, Tim and Alicia. You all have
What's
great
up?
voices. Maybe we should take that policy annotation GL 109 and turn it into a song. Policy
Huh?
annotation GL 109. Yes. Huh? You with me? Oh,
No.
maybe you're not with me. All right. I've gone too far again. All right. My humble apologies. Yeah. Rate us 5 stars, though, Alicia, right?
Yes, of
Five
course.
stars.
And we
All
will
right.
see and talk to you all next time.
Yay.
The views and
Bye.
All
opinions
right,
expressed in
bye.
this resource are those of the individual speaker and not necessarily those of the Property and Liability Resource Bureau, its membership, or any organization with which the presenter is employed or affiliated. The information, ideas, and opinions are presented as information only and not as legal advice or offers of representation. Individual policy language and state laws vary, and listeners should rely on guidance from their companies and counsel as appropriate.